The rain fell softly that November evening as Richard Matthews stood at his study window, watching the city lights blur through the droplets on the glass. At 58, he'd built his life on structure and predictability. As CEO of Matthews Technologies, his days were measured in quarterly reports and board meetings. His evenings were quiet, often lonely, in his spacious Boston townhouse. But tonight would be different. The doorbell rang just after 7 o'clock. Richard set down his reading glasses and walked to the entrance, wondering who would visit at this hour. When he opened the door, he found no one there. Just a wicker basket on his doorstep covered with a pink blanket. His heart stopped when he saw the tiny hand reaching out from beneath the fabric. Richard knelt down slowly, his knees protesting slightly. Inside the basket lay a sleeping baby girl, perhaps 18 months old, with blonde curls framing her peaceful face. She clutched a small stuffed rabbit, her chest rising and falling with the gentle rhythm of sleep. Attached to the basket's handle was a note. Written in handwriting he recognized immediately, even after 7 years. "You promised to protect us. Don't break it. Her name is Emma. She needs you now. I'm so sorry. Sarah." Richard's hands trembled as he lifted the basket and brought it inside, closing the door against the cold rain. He stood in his foyer looking down at this sleeping child, and memories flooded back. 7 years ago, Sarah Bennett had worked as a project coordinator at his company. She was 24 then, bright and ambitious, with dreams of becoming an architect. Richard had been her mentor, nothing more despite the office rumors. He'd helped her apply to graduate school, written recommendation letters, and when she'd confided in him about her troubled home life, he'd promised to help if she ever needed it. "If you're ever in real trouble," he'd told her one afternoon over coffee, "you can count on me." "That's a promise." She'd smiled then, that warm smile that reminded him of his own daughter, Catherine, who lived in Seattle with her family. Sarah had eventually left the company to pursue her studies, and they'd lost touch. Richard had often wondered how she was doing. Now here was her child left at his door with a plea he couldn't ignore. The baby stirred, her eyes opening slowly. They were blue-gray, intelligent and curious. For a moment she just looked at Richard, studying his face. Then her lower lip began to quiver. "Hey there, little one," Richard said softly, his voice gentler than he'd used in years. "It's okay. You're safe now." Emma whimpered but didn't cry. Perhaps she sensed his kindness. Richard carefully lifted her from the basket, surprised by how natural it felt to hold her, even after so many years since Catherine was small. Over the next few days, Richard's ordered life transformed completely. He took time off work, something he hadn't done in a decade. He learned to warm bottles, change diapers, and sing lullabies he thought he'd forgotten. Emma was a quiet child, watchful and sweet. She would sit on his lap during breakfast, playing with her rabbit while he read the paper aloud to her. "Listen to this, Emma," he'd say, pointing at headlines. "The world keeps turning, doesn't it?" She would babble in response, and Richard found himself smiling more than he had in years. But questions haunted him. Where was Sarah? Why had she left Emma? He hired a private investigator, a discreet professional who came recommended. Meanwhile, he consulted with lawyers about temporary custody and contacted child services, explaining the situation honestly. The social worker, a kind woman named Mrs. Patterson, saw how well Emma had settled and agreed to give them time to locate Sarah before making any decisions. 3 weeks after Emma arrived, the investigator brought news. Sarah had been struggling with severe health issues, a chronic condition that had worsened dramatically. She was currently in a treatment facility in Vermont, too ill to care for a child. She had no family to turn to, and Emma's father had never been in the picture. "She left the child with you because she trusted you," the investigator explained. "She remembered your promise from years ago." Richard sat in his study that evening. Emma, asleep upstairs in the guest room he'd converted into a nursery. He thought about promises, about the careless way we sometimes make them and the weight they can carry. He called Catherine in Seattle. "Dad, that's incredible," his daughter said after hearing the story. "What are you going to do?" "I don't know yet," Richard admitted. "But I can't just abandon her, Katie. Your mother would have known what to do." His wife, Margaret, had passed away 5 years ago. She'd had a gift for seeing what people needed before they knew it themselves. "Mom would have told you to follow your heart," Catherine said gently. "And Dad?" You sound different. Happier, maybe. She was right. Despite the chaos, the sleepless nights, and the uncertainty, Richard felt more alive than he had in years. He visited Sarah a month later, making the drive to Vermont on a crisp December morning. The facility was peaceful, surrounded by snow-covered hills. Sarah looked thinner than he remembered, her face pale but her eyes still bright. "Richard," she whispered when he entered her room. "You came, and you took Emma. I was so afraid." "You knew I would," he said simply, sitting beside her bed. "I made a promise." Tears rolled down Sarah's cheeks. "I had nowhere else to turn. The doctors say I'll recover, but it will take time. Maybe a year, maybe more. I couldn't keep her with me. And I couldn't bear the thought of her going to strangers." "She won't," Richard assured her. "Emma is safe, Sarah. She's thriving. And whenever you're well enough, we'll figure this out together." Sarah reached for his hand. "How can I ever thank you?" "By getting better," Richard said. "Emma needs her mother. But until then, she has me." The months that followed brought a rhythm Richard had never expected to find again. Emma learned to say his name. "Richie," she called him, unable to manage the full Richard. He took her to the park, where other grandparents smiled at them knowingly. He read her stories every night, her small hand holding his finger as she drifted off to sleep. Catherine visited for Christmas, bringing her own children. "She's brought you back to life, Dad," she said, watching him build blocks with Emma on the living room floor. "Maybe I've needed something to live for besides work," Richard admitted. "Something that matters." Sarah's recovery was slow but steady. Richard sent her photos and videos every week. He brought Emma to visit once a month. Watching as mother and daughter embraced, seeing the love and longing in Sarah's eyes. By the following autumn, Sarah was well enough to leave the facility. But she had no job, no home, no way to support Emma immediately. "Stay with us," Richard offered. "The townhouse is large enough. You need time to get back on your feet, and Emma needs both of us." It was an unconventional arrangement, but it worked. Sarah took a part-time position with an architectural firm, slowly rebuilding her career. In the evenings, the three of them would have dinner together. A makeshift family bound not by blood, but by kindness and circumstance. One evening, as Emma colored at the kitchen table and Sarah prepared tea, she turned to Richard. "You didn't have to do any of this," she said quietly. "Most people wouldn't have." Richard looked at Emma, now a vibrant 3-year-old, and smiled. "A promise is a promise," he said. "Besides, you gave me something I didn't know. I was missing. Purpose. Joy. A reminder that life still holds surprises." Sarah's eyes filled with tears. "You gave us everything. A home, safety, hope. We gave each other a second chance," Richard corrected gently. Years later, when Emma started kindergarten, she would draw pictures of her family, a young woman, an older man, and a little girl with a stuffed rabbit. Her teacher asked about it once. "That's my mama, and that's my Richie," Emma explained proudly. "He's my family, too." Sometimes Richard would think back to that rainy November evening, to the moment he opened his door and found a baby in a basket. He'd thought his life was settled, complete, winding down toward a quiet retirement. Instead, he discovered that life's greatest chapters can begin when we least expect them, arriving on our doorstep in the rain, asking us to remember a promise we once made. And some promises, Richard learned, aren't burdens to carry. They're gifts to receive, reminding us that kindness echoes through time, and that it's never too late to become the person someone desperately needs. The rain still fell some evenings, gentle against the windows. But now Richard's house was filled with laughter, with the patter of small feet, with the warmth of people who'd found each other when they needed it most. A promise kept, a life transformed, a family made whole,